But as far as the basic training, there's not a lot of stuff on emergency action plans. We talk, youth protection training is a huge deal and very important. There's training on weather hazards and all of that stuff. But one thing that I saw that was kind of lacking was specifically training in what do you do in an emergency situation. Post 9/11, that's a big deal. If any type of municipality, schools, anything else that receives any type of public or federal funding, they have to have those types of things in place. They have to have emergency plans, they have to have emergency coordinators and all of that stuff. But one of the things that I saw that was lacking, you can go on the BSA website and find all kinds of emergency action plans and everything that councils are required to have, forms and everything like that. But I think it stays more at that level. It doesn't necessarily trickle down to the unit level as much as it probably could. So going back to the youth protection, we talk a lot about that. The scouts are put in our hands to be responsible. So it got me to thinking that, as far as our pack goes, we didn't have necessarily a laid out emergency plan. I don't think I ever went to a meeting or anything like that where I thought, we're going to be out of luck if something happens. But it did get me to thinking that, as a den leader, if I've got an emergency situation, perhaps it's, maybe there is a tornado, maybe there's a fire. It did dawn on me that, hey, I'm going to do what is necessary to get my scouts to a safe place, to get them to safety, to get them taken care of. But I've got all these parents to deal with as well. And if I've got parents that are pulling scouts this way, and I'm trying to pull scouts this way, well, then you're going to have a bunch of confused scouts. And that really became my concern. The other thing was, as far as knowing where first aid supplies are. I sat there and had, just on me at one point where it's like, if something happened to him, I don't have a first aid kit. I've got first aid kit in the truck, but that's in the truck. So knowing where, first aid supplies are, knowing what to do in the event of an emergency, and it can be any type of emergency, medical emergency. Knowing what to do in those types of situations is going to be beneficial in taking care of the scouts. So what I decided to do was to put together an emergency action plan, and I got with Cubmaster Allen and kind of went over a little bit about it. When I sat down to do this emergency action plan, with my background, when I sat down and started to think about doing this, I thought about, I had this big, elaborate emergency action plan in mind, because that's what I'm used to seeing, that's what I'm used to dealing with. You look at companies, at organizations, and schools and stuff, their emergency action plans are big, and they could be a book's worth, and they detailed steps in every type of emergency. And that's really what I set down. But I think at a PAC level, when we're looking at that, we have to consider who our audience is. We have to, and that was a big thing that was difficult for me, was knowing that I had all this space to create an emergency plan and put down whatever I wanted to. But when it came down to it, if I had something that was that lengthy, good luck getting any parent to look over it. If I had something that lengthy, then the scouts it's not going to be applicable to the scouts, because it's going to be over their head. So I almost knocked it down. But so that was the biggest hurdle for me, was realizing that I have to keep it simple. And that was the thing that rang in my head when I sat down to do it, was keep it simple, keep it fun. I couldn't necessarily keep it fun. I put some graphics on there to try to keep it fun. But keeping it simple really became the goal, and became driving force of that. So I had to realize and recognize what it was I was trying to accomplish. I was trying to create guidelines to keep scouts safe in an emergency type situation. And so what I really ended up with was basically a action plan that would address, there's, you know, as we said, there's a ton of different emergency situations that could arise, but I took the 3 common emergencies that we could face at a meeting. And those were medical emergencies, tornadoes, and fires. Those were the 3 biggest things. I don't think the weather's as big a deal because most packs, most units are gonna have, they're gonna go with, if the school didn't meet that day, then we're not gonna meet that day. So I don't think anybody's gonna get snowed in at a pack meeting, so why address that? But, you know, with severe weather and stuff like that, I don't know how many, I don't know how many people are gonna be meeting if you're under an imminent tornado watch or warning. But, you know, we watch the weather, and that's, you know, things that you learn in the training is when it's a good idea to call a meeting or call an activity. So I think just with the guidelines that, and the training that BSA already puts out there, I think if we follow those guidelines, then we can circumvent a lot of these emergency situations that we might find ourselves in. But the main goal here was trusting that unit leaders knew what to do in an emergency situation, and then basically outlining what everybody's role in an emergency situation would be. So on the emergency plan, I put the scope on there, what the purpose of the emergency plan was, what meeting location this emergency plan was for. I outlined the roles of everybody. So I defined what the roles of people were. So defined what a unit leader was, what a family member was, a scout, or simply a member. And then I went into the emergency plan. There's not much there on the emergency plan, but basically it addresses the 3 major different emergencies: fire, tornado, and medical. It outlines what everybody's role and expectations are in those types of emergencies. The plan can be flexible. It was intended to be flexible so that it can be used at the normal meeting place, or it can be used, you know, on an outing or something. So this is what I had copies of, and Christy will get that put up on the blog for everybody to be able to see. So this is just kind of what I came up with. Anybody that wants to like cut and paste their own stuff on there is welcome to do that. But it just, what I wanted to address and what I didn't want to see is I wanted to know that within a den, I wanted the parents to understand that the den leader is going to determine what happens, and that if the den leader asks that parent, then that parent can help. And the scouts will follow the den leader, and the parents will follow the den leader, so that we didn't have a den leader telling a scout, you need to go this way, and you need to do this, and then the parent telling the same scout, you need to do something else, and then the scout standing there not knowing what to do. That was the biggest issue that I saw that could be a potential hazard that really needed to be addressed. Something else to keep in mind, there's really no teeth in that in an emergency situation. As a den leader or as a unit leader, if you're trying to get those scouts in a safe place, and a scout's parent says, my kid's coming with me, and they yank him out there, there's not much you can do about that. That parent wants to take him home, wants to take him somewhere else, well, you know, that's their deal. Not much you can do about that.
But that's where I think if you sit down with the parents at a den meeting and have that conversation and explain to them that you have a roster, and that is the way the BSA is going to know that every boy is safe, is that as your den, I need to check you off. So please don't please follow the guidelines, and here's why, because if you're not on my list, I'm gonna send the cops looking for you.
Right.
And you don't want the cops at your door at 10 o'clock at night going, Johnny is missing, and you're going, he's in bed. So if you have that conversation with your parents, maybe that will make it a little bit easier for them to understand why you've got what you've got. But you also have to know, as a den leader, you better have that list.
Right.
Because in an emergency, trying to remember all those boys' names, and whether or not they have a parent with them, or who their parent is really difficult.
Right. That kind of, you know, in with what Christy was saying, that goes into with, you know, so you've got the plan, you've got the emergency plan. Now, how's everybody going to know about it? And that would be, you know, and that comes from, just like she said, meeting with the parents, meeting with unit leaders, making sure that everybody's on the same page and making that available. Ways that these can be made available. If you've got a website, put it on your PAC website. You know, I know that we have a PAC handbook, if you will, including that in your PAC handbook. You know, introducing and discussing it at a meeting. All good ways to get that out there and make sure that everybody understands and knows what's expected of them. In addition to this, we have a map that supplements it. This is a map of our meeting place, which is Oak Ridge Elementary. There's a legend down here, but also on it, it shows evacuation routes. It shows where fire extinguishers are located. It shows where the best sheltering locations are located. And it also, this one also shows the location of an AED, if that should be necessary. Oak Ridge also, all of these friendship schools have the doors numbered. So the door numbers are also on this map. And I was able to get that at most meeting places, whether they be at churches or schools. I think most of us meet at those types of places, already have emergency plans in place. They already have maps like this. All I did was I got a hold of the schools and was able to get a copy of the map and basically went and kind of modified it for our purposes. It was already laid out. There was no need to go and do extra work on something that was already there. And then just kind of to wrap it up, some things we talked about, kind of some things to think about, some reasons to have an emergency plan. But also kind of facilitating being ready for those emergencies, because it's all good and well if you know where to shelter, if you know how to get out, and that's where it all starts. But let's assume that there is a sheltering situation or something like that for whatever reason. You don't know how long you're going to be sheltered. We typically expect to be at a meeting for an hour. So, you know, during an hour's time, there's not much that goes on. You don't really, most scouts, most people don't need food in that time. Most people don't need water or anything like that. But let's assume that you're in there long term, longer than expected. So, you know, most agencies such as FEMA, Ready.gov, all those websites that you can go to, most experts will suggest having, you know, a gallon of water a person a day. And like workplace stuff, they talk about having food for each individual, water. While we won't go into amounts and stuff like that, but those are, you know, first aid for, you know, each person. Dust masks, those types of things. They talk about having those for each person, especially in the workplace. But, you know, from a unit standpoint, getting supplies for every single person in a unit, actually providing that for every single person in that unit is not really cost effective. And also, where are you going to store those things? Well, the best place to store it is with the person that's going to be using it. So one of the concepts, one of the ideas that I thought about to kind of circumvent those issues is, you know, as Tigers, every scout's introduced to the 6 essential outdoor items. And what better way? The 6 essential outdoor items have water, food, first aid kit. So while we hit on those things when we go hiking and when we do things outdoors and stuff like that, you know, an easy way to make sure that scouts have what they need in the event of an emergency is just to encourage them to bring their 6 essential outdoor items with them to den meetings, to PAC meetings. then every scout has what they need. Every scout has it with them. So in that type of event, everybody's prepared, everybody's got the things that they need. And, you know, that doesn't necessarily cover everything that's needed in an emergency situation or that could be needed. The possibilities are endless. Things could be added to the 6 essential outdoor items, just to add a little extra. But, you know, so that's just one idea that I had. I'm sure there's a ton of different things, but that, you know, helps to keep supplies where they need to be. That gives scouts a sense of responsibility. It gives them something to be responsible for. It ensures that those supplies are with them. So that's kind of pretty much all I've got. I know it was quick, but I didn't take up a whole lot of time. But I really do appreciate being able to speak. So, and I appreciate all of you listening to me. Does anybody have any questions or anything like that? I will. Am I running off?
Yeah.
I'm here.
Okay.
So
So if you have questions, you can find me
yeah.
afterward.
If you come up with anything, let me know. You can put contact information on there. You can put my email on there or whatever.
Okay.
If anybody has any questions or anything like that, that's just a very basic summary of the stuff that I encountered and did in putting this stuff together. So if there are any questions, you know, you're more than welcome to ask, and I'll help any way that I can. So, all right, I appreciate it. And we'll get back to
Okay, so as all of you know, we have a blog. And so we change things every month to figure out how it's going to work best. We don't envision having this many of you at any given point in time. Woohoo, us! We're so excited y'all are all here.